In this episode of the Nurse Practitioner Podcast, Dr. Carrie A. Milner and Dr. Ellen Feinau-Overholt explore strategies and opportunities for sharing DNP project impact and lessons learned. Part 4. Thank you both for joining us today. First, with regards to DNP projects, many students wonder, should I turn my project paper into a manuscript for publication?
And the answer resoundingly to that is yes, you should. And the key, I think, to that, I have a couple of tips I'd like to share with our audience. The key to that is really making sure that you think about that at the very beginning. That as you're pondering, you're writing your report up, that you're thinking about publishing that. And so every DNP student or DNP in an organization, there are requirements that you're going to need to meet for that particular reporting structure. Those are consistent and they're going to be there. But at the same time, manuscripts are a little bit different. So the first tip I would have for you is, as you write that report, keep thinking about your audience that you want to share that with in your organization, your faculty, your clinical mentor, others that key stakeholders for your project, but also keep thinking about the broader audience that you would want to reach and how you're writing that information. Really key that we all do, no matter how seasoned of a writer you are, you all do this. We have things in here that don't get to the paper. So as you're writing, think about how you're writing your report so that it's very clear what your project accomplished, what you accomplished through your project. Carrie and I were just working on something this morning, and we were looking at a paper by a DNP student, and we were thinking about, what did they think here? What did that person think here? Because it wasn't clear. So I know there's stuff in that person's brain that didn't get to the paper. And so you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that what you're clearly communicating is what you know and your expertise and what you've done. So that's one thing about thinking about writing your manuscript from the beginning, and then making sure that what's in that manuscript is clear to the reader you want to reach. And that's including language and that kind of thing. Second tip is thinking about how you are looking at your formatting. So this is a kind of combination tip that I would give you. Number one, you're going to have formatting structures, particularly if you're a student. You're going to have, this is the way you write your paper, right? Headings and that kind of thing. Know which ones of those are academic demonstrations of your learning and which ones are project specific. Because the academic learning pieces, you don't need in a manuscript. You want to talk about your project in a manuscript. The second thing that I would give you on that particular tip about that would be, go to the journal that you want to publish from, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but go to that journal that you want to publish from and find articles that are similar to your project. Look at those for formatting. What headings did they use? How did they construct that particular journal article? And then look at their flow. Look at what they said in regard to what your project is and what's unique about your project, what's similar. If it's similar, you can write pretty much the same way, because that's what journal readers of that journal are going to be used to reading. And you want to not make a barrier to them to getting to your information. So you want to write as much as you can, like that journal likes it to be presented, so that you can get through that review process rather quickly. All the work in the review process is about, you write the manuscript, then it goes to a review in a peer-reviewed journal, which is what you want to use. You want to submit to a peer-reviewed journal. The reviewers review, and then they're going to give you feedback, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And then you're going to have editors that are going to read your article and going to edit to make it work for that journal, because every journal has a style. So all of those things can help you when you're looking at an article that is already published, and you can learn from that journal article that's already published. Okay, the last tip is, well, where do I publish? Because that's often a question we get, as faculty members, as we go, where should I publish? Okay, I want to publish, but where should I publish? So just going to give you a couple of ideas to think about. There are tools that you can use, and I really like sending folks who have never published before, particularly, to these tools, because it just helps take that angst out of, where do I publish? And so I'm going to give you two of them, but there are far more to look at. And we'll share those with Kimberly, and maybe she can post them somewhere that you guys can get them. But one tool is called Jane. And I do have that, and I'm not even going to try to remember what that's called. I'll just read it to you. It's the journal/author name estimator, Jane. So as you think about this is from, it's jane.biosemantics.org. And you can take your abstract that you write and you can plop it in, and then it will come out with journals that would be good matches for you to publish with or in. And this is really helpful because a lot of times we don't know where the best match might be. And so I recommend Jane to you. And there's others like, but the thing is, where do they pull from to look for that best match? Do they look broad or do they look narrow? And some of them look in only the journals that they publish, like Elsevier. There's an Elsevier one. Let me give you that. It's called Journal Finder. And you plop your abstract in, same, but they look at their journals. And that's journalfinder.elsevier.com. And so you can find what Elsevier journals might work for you. So I would just encourage you to use that as your first pass for what might be a good place for you, that's a good match for your manuscript that you want to publish from the project that you've done. Anything you'd add, Carrie?
So Ellen, and you may be covering this in the next question. You should have a conversation with your DNP project advisor and your clinical mentor, because there may be projects that are not publishable. It's possible. And for a variety of different reasons, that there may have been challenges. You may never have been able to enact the change. Like the practice change may have not been able to happen, or maybe you couldn't get the data to evaluate the change. So I think you've given really good tips about what to go to the journal that you're interested in, find a paper that's already been published that's like yours, so that you will see the things that need to be in each section to have a publishable paper. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, great point. I am an optimist. So I would say if you have an experience where you didn't get the data or you didn't even get to enact the change, what did you learn? Turn your lessons learned into a manuscript. So many DNP students learn stuff that's not in their project, in this box of project. They learn information, they learn systems knowledge that isn't there through their lessons learned that may not be part of that manuscript template. And so I would encourage you, if you have experiences like that, to figure out a way, and definitely, and I appreciate, Carrie, you mentioning faculty mentor, clinical mentor, definitely work with them. But those are opportunities for you also to publish what you learned. So much of our experiences, we don't publish. We just publish, and I'm going to be, we publish the numbers, again, in a small box. That's great. And we need all that. Of course we do. But we also can learn from what you learned through your DNP experience, particularly if it was one that was unusual. And systems learning is something that we don't typically, it doesn't fit in that box. We have to understand it a different way. So do think about all those kinds of things. I think, though, Carrie, you mentioned something that I would like to touch on that I really didn't touch on before. And that is that there must be an agreement with your organization in which you did the project that those data can be shared. So do think about that. Again, being the optimist that I am, I tend to think, oh, well, yes, we've worked out all those problems. And you should, long before you ever get to the publishing stage, you should talk about those things way on early in your project work and in agreements, so that you have that all cleared up. But before you do, and they should be a part of that work of writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting, so that, and I would even encourage you to ask them to publish with you as second, third, or last author, because they contributed to that work, and have them write with you. You can learn from them as good as writers, and and you can learn from team writing. That's always an adventure. So I would encourage all of that. I think all of that is part of this process. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie, for getting us clarified on that part.
And I would just add, Ellen, that the other thing that you said that I thought was so important was you have an academic requirement. You have things in the paper that are an academic piece, and then you have the actual project specific content. and that journal editors, I've heard several of them say, they've said it to me, Carrie, we don't want papers that are the DNP project paper that are 100 pages long. So you've hit on it nicely that you work with your advisor, you work with your clinical mentor, you work with people that have published before so that they are able to help you pare down exactly what the project specific content that should be published.
That's great. Thank you. Next, how do I handle rejection or criticism constructively?
Oh, great question. And this is a hard one sometimes because you put your lifeblood into this project. And when you get feedback that says this isn't so great, it doesn't feel so good. So first thing I would say is read it. And this has been written about before, so this is not new knowledge. But I would say read it, get angry, cry, whatever you need to do, have a sounding board. I would not read it by myself. I read it with somebody. Carrie and I do this often. We read it and we're like, well, that reviewer clearly didn't understand what we were talking about. Frustration, right? But then we began to, once we kind of get our emotions out of the way, because you got to deal with them, they're very real. We start looking at it like, well, what are they trying to tell us? So I would say you first of all get clarity on where you are with your own reception of that information. And we often have had reviewers who one would say one thing that was maybe quite negative, and the other person would have a glowing review of the article. So I would take that balance and go, well, why did this person have this negative response to whatever was written there? And remember, I suppose the very underpinning foundation is your article, your manuscript is not you. This is about what you wrote in your project, and we can always learn to write better. I've been writing for a very long time, and I can always write better. So don't take that as it's about you. But when you do look at the information, when you can, your emotions are kind of like abated a little bit and the sting might be a little less, then take a look at it and say, what are they trying to tell me about how I can strengthen the work? One thing, again, Carrie and I have written a bit together with our colleagues, and one of the things that we enjoy doing is looking at our review together. And so you might want to pull in your faculty mentor and say, let's just look at this review together. And then you might have a response, and that person might say, well, have you thought about looking at it this way? Maybe they're trying to say this. And then you say to yourself, I had not thought about that when I wrote this. That's a really good, important thing to think about, strengthening my work. That's one of the words that I always think about when I look at reviews of manuscripts is, how does this help me strengthen my work? Not everything a reviewer says is going to strengthen your work. Let's let that sit there for a minute. So you don't have to knee-jerk response to a reviewer's comments. You need to ponder them and go, how does this strengthen my work? And then use it to strengthen your work. If it doesn't strengthen it, like we've had some negative comments before that were opinions. They weren't about strengthening the work. They didn't understand and they were opinions. Thank you for that opinion. Always, that's my number one tip. Always be grateful. Always be grateful for that and tell them that. Thank you so much for this comment. And I'll give you a format in just a minute. But when you're looking at the comment, think about how you're going to use it to strengthen the work. And that's your response back to the publisher, to the editor is, thank you so much for this. This is what I did with what you told me, reviewer. And that is helpful to the reviewer because they know that you took them seriously. You valued what they gave you and you used it to strengthen the work. And that's really, really important. Anytime you have negative criticism that feels negative, that doesn't feel valuable to you, my advice is to swipe left. Just move on past that. You don't need to necessarily take that in. You don't need to use it. Just swipe left and find things that do strengthen the work that help. Again, going back to the first question, what is it that your audience needs to understand about the work that you've done? And if something wasn't clear, a reviewer helps you see that, that's really valuable. It is invaluable, really. You've got to take that in and use it. So formatting, what do? There are rules and regs around all this from every journal. How do you respond back to reviewers? How do you respond back to this criticism that you've gotten of your work? And remember, criticism isn't negative. Criticism is information, feedback to help you have a better manuscript so that the people that are reading your work understand what you did and the impact that you tried to make and how they can learn from your work that's out there in the published arena. So I would recommend that you have a table. Usually that's required, but even if it's not, I would recommend you do it. There's several ways you could do it, but at least these two columns have to be present: reviewer comments and what you did with that. Okay. You might want one more column with page numbers and location, depending on if the manuscript is numbered. There's so many things to think about how, so that it's very clear. Rarely do you get to use track changes in a manuscript and fix it. So you respond in a tabular form, so that here's the comment and here's what we did, and you put the whole 9 yards about what you did and what you changed. And then they look for that information, usually in a different way. So first of all, the question was, how do I handle rejection? Well, that's another deal. So we talked about criticism, right? What about rejection? And I hate the word. I don't even like it. To me, I would reframe that and I'd go, not a good match for me. Not a good match for me. I have a person that I'm writing with right now, and we were writing and we worked and reworked the manuscript, put it in for the final time. Just not a good match. We're not going to accept it. So I said to that person, I said, okay, let's redo. Where are we going to go now? We have a whole nother ball game to attend to now. It's our open door. We don't have to match that journal anymore. Well, let's think about where we want to go. And we went to Jane, started looking, have options now. We're going to be thinking about where we want to go because the story needs to be told. So I would say reframe that rejection into opportunity and think about where is a better match for you and your work. Again, though, you got to kind of get your emotions out of the way before you can really do that. And for this particular person that I was just sharing you about, we took about 2 months before we really got back into the work. Maybe a little bit more than that now that I think about it. We took a bit of time to just ponder, think, do you really want to go forward with this? And then just reworking it now. And we're reworking it and we're reworking it from the ground up with our foundation. And guess what? We had reviewer comments. So we took all those and we strengthened that work. And now we're going to be moving forward with that good foundation we have into another lane, if you will. So those would be the things I would share. Carrie, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so it's along the lines of what you just finished up with, is that sometimes the rejection or not a good fit for our journal at this time could be because they are not publishing on that topic at this time. So that is, goes back to doing your homework of, you also need to look at the journal just to see, have they published on your topic recently? And just make sure you do your homework, because you might have an excellent project. It's written really well. You've done everything that you need to do. And then they just published a paper on, palliative care in the ICU, nurse trigger tools or something like that. And so they're not ready to do that. So, try again. Don't give up, because you've invested so much. And we see this, Alan and I have seen this with people new to this. They're so exhausted from the process that they don't want to invest again. And what I tell you is, take some time off, put a date in your calendar to say, I'm going to contact my mentor again, and we're going to start this all over again. Because I love what you said, Ellen. The world needs to hear the story. It needs to be heard. My other suggestion is because this is so exhausting for new people to this, break it up into sections. Do not try to tackle the feedback on a manuscript in one sitting. You'll make mistakes, you'll skip things, you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to make the table today, and I'm going to put all the feedback in the table. Tomorrow, I'm going to tackle, the first 3 things that reviewer 1 said, and do it that way slowly over time, because you may go back and change some things. So I just think those are good strategies for your foundation, because we expect you to, once you do this once, we want you to continue contributing to the knowledge base of nursing in the form of publication or conferences.
What types of conferences, journals, or platforms, target audience, are appropriate for my work?
So when thinking about where to share your DNP DNP project findings or any evidence-based practice quality improvement project, it's important to start planning early. And ideally, this would be during the implementation plan phase of your project, that you would already start thinking before you even execute the practice change or implementing that intervention. You're going to think about, where might I share the findings? And so this is where you're laying the groundwork, brainstorming with your faculty advisor, clinical mentor about where might the findings have the most impact. And that this should be a section that you actually have in your academic paper, where you've thought out, where can I disseminate this in the plan? And that once you've analyzed your results, you now revisit that plan and then see, is it still relevant? Is that the audience I want to go with? And that you have a plan to work from. You're not just working from nothing. I think Ellen and I have both said this quite a bit. Your DNP project advisor is a huge resource for the type of journal that you may disseminate your project findings in. And they can help you with finding where might be a good fit. The other tip that I'd like to add to what we've been talking about here today is collaborate with the health science librarian or the medical librarian, because these individuals, I consider them magic, because they work their magic when they navigate the world of publications and conferences. They can point you to the right journals or help you figure out what conferences are worth your time. And then what's really important is they can alert you to predatory conferences and journals. Because Ellen and I didn't touch on this, and so I'll do it here really quick. Once you publish something, and this could be, in a journal, but it also could be an abstract in a conference proceedings, you start to get emails from everyone. And a lot of times it's predatory journals. And so just an aside here that's not really part of this question, check with your health science librarian or your medical librarian. They know the up-to-date list of that. And then Ellen's tip on Jane, I've used that a lot with students. Great tip. No matter what you decide, you must present your results to the practice setting, the place where you did the project. It must be done. And this could be done through an executive summary or a PowerPoint presentation, even a poster. And it's really about making sure that the people who were directly involved in your work, impacted by your work, that could be nurses, administrators, and the stakeholders, actually see what the results are and can they use it. So I really hope in all DNP programs that is an expectation for graduation, that you have to do that. So when it comes to broader dissemination, it comes down to who will be impacted by your work. So ask yourself, was this project conducted within a specific health system? If so, maybe there's an internal evidence-based practice or quality improvement conference that you can access that happens annually within that health system. But if your project has broader implications, like it could influence practice regionally, nationally, then aim for bigger. So here are some examples that I'm just going to run through. So for many hospitals and healthcare systems, they host their own annual conferences that do focus on evidence-based practice or quality improvement. And this would be a great starting point for any project that's done within that health system. Then many states have their own nursing or advanced practice nursing organizations that hold annual conferences. And these are fantastic for reaching the audience that are in your state, but it's still broader than your institution. And I'll just give the example. I live in the state of Connecticut. I teach at a university in Connecticut, and our practice organization for advanced practice nurses is CTAPRNs. They have an annual conference every year. So the students that I advise, most of them submit abstracts to present. And present could be in the form of a podium or a poster presentation. Next up is there are regional conferences. So this might be, I live in the Northeast. And so depending on where you're located, I think you probably know what your region is, and that they have conferences that bring together healthcare professionals from that area. And so these are a great way that it's bigger than your state, but it's not national, to present there. And, a lot of reasons, you may be able to get in a car to go to the conference. Like there's many reasons why, practical reasons why you might choose a regional conference. Now, I do have to put in a plug for that, and I'm doing this in the context of teaching in a DNP program. So DNP prepared nurses, it's a doctorate. It's the terminal degree. So I really expect individuals with this degree to be presenting nationally at a national conference for whatever their work or specialty organization that they're involved in. So these are the big ones. They're going to attract a diverse audience from across the country. You're reaching more people. They're often hosted by major nursing organizations. So I'll just give you the example of AANP, the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. If you made a change in the clinical setting that impacted nurse practitioners, this is a great platform to disseminate your work. And it could also be education. So the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, it could be leadership. There's leadership conferences for nursing. Switching gears, if you're looking to publish your work, I think Ellen, really gave you some great tips. And I'll just reiterate what she said, that make sure that the journal aligns with the project topic and the intended impact, and that you have a right fit for the audience. And put in a plug again for those health science librarian or your medical librarian. They can really help you with this to find the right fit. And ultimately, dissemination should be intentional and strategic. Think about who needs to see your work and where it can have the greatest impact. Dissemination isn't just about checking a box. It's making sure your hard work actually translates into real world change. And I think at the end of the day, isn't that the whole point of the DNP project?
How do I ensure project credit and authorship roles during dissemination?
Great question. And it's very important because you have put so much investment in time, energy, and expertise into your work. And anybody else that's helped you do this. So everyone should get the proper credit, and it should be done fairly. And so here are some tips of how to navigate through this. The first one is to start the conversation early. And I think I need to remember to do this myself when I'm working with, again, the context that I'm living in is students with the DNP project. And, I sometimes forget to do this, and early on in the planning stage. So as you bring the team together, you bring that project team together, you should be talking about your dissemination plan that was in your implementation plan. Hey, I'm thinking of publishing in this in the Journal for Nurse Practitioners, and, asking the team how they feel about that, what contributions they want to make, so that idea is introduced, and that also introduced that the DNP student is going to do the majority of the work. And so they're going to be first author, and I will get to more of that in a minute, but let me just go through some of the other tips that I'm just thinking of. So thinking of, as you begin and you start the conversation, this can be with the advisor, the clinical preceptor, other team members. You have an open discussion about authorship and credit. And then you might at that point, talk about who's going to write. Usually in a DNP project, the student writes a paper, they do the analysis with help. And then when we come to the dissemination piece, depending on who they're working with, they may need help with writing. But I have never, and I don't know if Ellen has differently, I've never seen, in my experience, the DNP student has always been the first author. since I've been working, and teaching in a DNP program. I haven't had a situation where they have not, though I've heard colleagues say, and again, this is outside of this podcast, so I'll just cover it really quick. There are instances if you plan early. So in this part where you're talking about dissemination before the project ever gets implemented. Some of my colleagues have said at that time that they've had the discussion with the student that if the student decides that for whatever reason, life happens, that they can't write a manuscript, that you have an agreement that you will write it and do all the work. However, and I've had colleagues say this, that they want to be the first author. I haven't done it that way. Well, what I've done is I will do a lot of the work if life happens and have meetings with the student and continue to keep them in, and I will keep them as first author because I'm just honoring that they did do all of that work and that really I was advising, and then I'm here to turn the paper into a manuscript, helping them in that capacity. So I think it's an individual situation, and I'm sure there are situations where the clinical mentor or the DNP project advisor warrants being first author. Okay, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. So next thing that I want to talk about is understanding the criteria for authorship. So in academic and professional settings, authorship isn't just about who did the most work. It's about who made the significant intellectual contributions to the project. And this could include things like designing the project, analyzing data, or writing parts of the manuscript. So the resource I always have students go to, and that a lot of journals follow, is the ICMJE. So that's the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, criteria for authorship. And they have 4 criteria. The first is substantial contributions to the conception or design of the work. Number 2 is drafting or revising the work critically for important intellectual content. 3 is final approval of the version to be published. And 4 is agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. So if someone's contribution doesn't meet these criteria, they can still be acknowledged in the acknowledgement section that they've played a key role in this work, but they should not be included as author. So another tip is putting it in writing. So once the DNP student or the NP has had the conversation around authorship, they should document it. Document it in an email. Say, hey, I'm summarizing what we said in our meeting. It doesn't have to be super formal, and that you could just list the authors and what each person's responsibilities are. And this is so helpful to avoid misunderstandings later on. And I have worked in teams over my career where there have been misunderstandings. It's so easy to happen. So I know Ellen and we do this ourselves. We've been doing it for a long time now. And I hope that listeners out there, I hope that you'll follow this one. Put it in writing when you have the conversation, and have the conversation at the beginning. So now when it comes to presenting your work at conferences, the same principles apply. So if you're presenting in a poster or giving a talk, make sure that everyone who's contributed is acknowledged. This could mean listing co-authors on the poster or on your slide. And if they can't be with you and it's a presentation, often in the teams that I work in, we put people's pictures and where they're from so that you have a visual is nice and that you acknowledge what their contribution is. Again, these tips that I'm sharing, include fairness, but it's also about professionalism. Next up, I want to talk about order. Order of authors matters. So in most disciplines, the first author is the person, and I know I'm probably contradicting myself, but it usually is the person who did the majority of the work. Okay, what does that work entail? It needs to match those ICMJE guidelines, right? So you have to look at analysis, doing the work, doing the critical review. And you do the most of that, and usually that's the student, the DNP student, so you go first. Then the last author position is the senior contributor. So that's like your advisor or your mentor. And then I'm going to give you the example with Ellen and I in the national team that we're writing the American Journal of Nursing series. I'm leading the team. Ellen, though, is my senior mentor. And really, Ellen is a mentor to me. She teaches me so much. And so in our articles, you'll see that she's last. On the articles where I have done met the criteria for first author with the guidelines, I'm first. And then you'll see we'll switch. We'll have different people on our team switch to first author. And as lead of the whole series, I switch to second author. Because usually the second author person backs up the first one. So it's a lot to take in of what we're saying in this podcast. So I would suggest that you talk about it with your mentor. You could talk about it. That could be clinical or academia, who it is. So finally, I want to talk about being proactive about protecting your work. So if you're presenting at a conference or publishing in a journal, make sure you understand the copyright and the intellectual property policies. It is too big to talk about this in this podcast. So I just want to stick it in here so that you can, if you're taking notes, just write that down, put a little box next to it so that you know if you're putting in like a checklist that you made up, that is your own intellectual property, and you want to be able to use that from journal to journal or in another presentation or something else, Ellen and I would recommend that you copyright it before you submit the manuscript to the journal. Let's see, what else? I think just to wrap it up, in summary, you want to ensure project credit and authorship roles. In order to do that, you got to clear communication, mutual respect, planning. It may not be the fun part. A lot of people shy away from this. Then it ends up being, there's miscommunications and misunderstandings, and it doesn't make for good relationships. So my suggestion is just you go in at the beginning. I love Brene Brown is clear is kind, unclear is unkind, and just do it. Because at the end of the day, as a DNP student, as a nurse practitioner, for your work, you should get credit because it is hard work that you're doing. Ellen, I know I was long-winded in that. Do you have anything to add?
No, good, all good stuff. And particularly, I think, good stuff for novice writers to consider, because these are things we've learned over years. And so I highly just encourage you to, hey, just take notes and come back and listen and take notes and just go, okay, have I thought about that? It's not that these are like, rules that are stone. It's that these are guides that we have learned help you to be most successful with the least amount of, ruffles, kind of get you so that you can be efficient in your work and get your message out there.
How do I prepare and deliver an effective presentation? What should I include in my presentation slides?
Oh boy, that's a big question, isn't it? So many folks have that particular question. Well, one of the things that I'm going to give you several tips. So the first tip I'm going to tell you is title. Think about your title long and hard. Number one, if you've never done this before, you might not even realize your title is what people are going to look at to decide whether they go to your presentation or go to see your poster. So you want to make your title what the best enticing title about what your work is that you can to get people to come. Presentations and posters are not about presentations and posters. They're about getting your message across. So I would encourage you, as you're pondering all of this stuff that we're giving you today, and we're giving you a lot because this is a big topic, that you think about what it is you want people to remember when you're done. When you're finished with your poster and they've walked away from yours and they're on to the next one, what do you want them to remember about your poster? What do you want them to remember about your presentation? What do you want them to be talking about when they walk out the door, or are they silent? You want them to be you want to be thinking about that when you think about your title, because that's the thing that's going to be in the conference proceedings that's going to draw people to your work. So that's the first thing I'd invest time in. Don't just think about it, and please We all have biases, but this is a bias of mine. Don't let somebody else write your title for you. You write your title. You know what your work is, you write your title, and don't try to mimic someone else's title. Write your title for you. I've seen people who have written titles that go, oh, that's funny, but I would never write that title. It's funny, it attracted me, but I wouldn't write it because it's just not me. But it's them, and I was intrigued and I wanted to go see what they had to say. Did they have a good sense of humor? Because it was a funny title. So think about it being you, reflecting you. Tip 2, less is good, but it is not the metric of your poster or your presentation. Meaning, on your slides, I've had people say to me, you need to redo your slides because you have more than 6 words. I'm like, are you crazy? No, I need more than 6 words to tell you what I need to tell you, and I want you to remember this. So my metric for, is it a good slide or a good poster, is what are people drawn to on that slide, and is that something that they will take away? And remember, there's this whole negotiation around PowerPoint or not PowerPoint today. And so think about what other ways you can use to make your message, the thing they take away, more meaningful. So I would think about your audience and your message, and what do you need to do in your presentation or poster that's going to bring it to the place where it's going to be memorable. Sometimes it's not even going to be what's on the slide. It's going to be how you present the slide. Where your poster, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. The poster it's locked real estate, right? You only have so much. So you need to decide what's going to be the key point of that poster. And at a recent meeting that Carrie and I went to, we went around all the posters and we took pictures. And that would be one of the things I'd recommend. That's another tip. But we took pictures because we wanted to see. And it's like, well, in some of them we went, it's too much. Don't even have time, not in my brain, because poster sessions are grueling. There are a lot of things to think about, and you're going through and you're looking at all this information. So you want to be memorable. So how do you get there? You put the thing you want people to take away center stage, make it your biggest real estate investment, right? And then for presentations, think about the same principle. But the thing that loses people 99% of the time in a presentation is people read their slides. They don't tell their story. So I'd say tell your story. The biggest tip I give you is tell your story. Use graphics and color to pull people in. Use humor. Now you may go, I'm not a natural joke teller. It's okay. You don't have to be. You can still find humor in things that you don't tell jokes. You just be lighthearted. Make a joke in your slide. Don't be so rigid that you go, I got to fit in the box. You don't need to fit in any box. The other piece of information that's probably a little bit of maybe not common is don't use the rules of engagement for presentations that you see that are written everywhere, which is like don't have more than 6 words on your slide. Use common sense. If you wouldn't want to see that slide, don't make your slide so packed that you wouldn't want to see it. Use common sense and make it a digestible piece of information that people can absorb while you're talking and you're not reading your slide, you're telling your story. Think about how long you have to tell that story too, and can people engage all that you have there in the time frame you're going to allow them. If you have 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds a slide, whatever it might be, can they absorb everything that you have? And did you make your big takeaway the biggest thing on the slide so they go, oh, that's what I remember. And I remember what she said about that. She gave this really poignant story part that made me remember that's the deal. Yeah. And they walk out talking about that. I would recommend you have a QR code or a handout that people can take away something so that it's something that they're going to get from when you engage them. Have a business card because that helps people know who you are and where to get in hold of you without saying, hey, can I write it down? That never works. People lose that. Just have a business card. And then this is the part that's probably hard for people, but practice the presentation. But even more than that, practice engaging the audience. Think about having someone that's in the audience that you can connect with eye to eye, and you present to that person. And you look around a little bit, but you present to that person. or a person in the back that you present to, or a person who smiles at you that you can go and smile at every now and then, and you go, oh, they're going to engage me. That makes me feel a little more comfortable, and I can practice that before you ever get there. And then always close your presentation with a thank you to your audience and reiterate the takeaway that you want them to be buzzing about when they walk out the door. Those are my tips. What do you think, Carrie?
Those are great tips. And the one that I would add to yours is anticipate some questions that the audience might ask, and that you can prepare a clear answer. Your answer needs to be like less than a minute, right? Like you can't have this long-winded answer. And then my other thought is that I really liked how you said you're going to tell your story, and that to bring it back again, the context that I'm doing this within is that I have new novice speakers, right? They're scared. So I tell them that it is a journey, and that the first step is that you are going to grow yourself by presenting at the state conference. You're going to get a podium presentation. You're going to try to do everything that you said. However, your backup is going to be that you're going to write down your whole presentation, so that if you get up there the first time and you freeze, you can just read off of your piece of paper or your note cards or however. Or I'm challenged by this a lot of times, that the speaker mode doesn't come up and the notes don't come up in the thing. So that's why I divert to make sure you have a copy of it. You could just read off of that, and that the goal will be for the next presentation that you do, that you'll do less of this, and that will go in increments.
That's great. Simon Sinek said one time, he was speaking, and it was a huge group of people, and all of a sudden everything just went out of his head. And this is a very consummate speaker. I mean, he's excellent, right? He said everything went out of his head, and he thought, what do I do? And he said, I'm going to acknowledge it. He said, you probably would think that I would never have that happen. But everything just went out of my head. And what were we talking about? And somebody from the audience, tell me what we were talking about. And somebody popped up and goes, oh, yes, that's right. And he went right on. And I think two things happened in that. Number one, the big speaker that maybe you went, or you feel like people are looking toward you to be this big speaker, they recognize you're just a normal human being, first of all. Secondly, it helps you check the audience. What did they remember about what you just said? And then it gives you a place of takeaway and thinking, oh, yeah, that's not really what I want them to remember. I really want them to remember this. Or, yay, they got the thing that I wanted to tell them about. So those are great tips, Carrie. Thanks for bringing those real life things up. Those are great.
On a similar note, how do I summarize my project concisely and attractively for a poster?
Yes, this is a little harder than a presentation because you have that locked real estate. You don't have as much room to tell all you'd love to tell, which we have a little bit more leeway in a presentation. So thanks, Kimberly, for the question. The key piece for the poster is, what is it you want people to remember? So I would encourage you, if you have this in advance and you're building as a DNP student in particular, you're building your brand, if you will, and who you are, I would go to a conference, go to the poster session there where you want to present, and I would take pictures of the posters and go, what's the most common? And then I do a little bitty analysis of them and go, what did they do? Which ones do I like best? What looks the best to me? Which feels the most comfortable for the time I want to sit there? Because by the time you've looked at 60 posters or more, your feet hurt, your back hurts, you've been standing all this time, and you want to make sure that you're 61, right? Your poster's 61 in the mix. You don't want people to go, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to go get something to drink, right? You want them to continue to be engaged. So think about that. That would be one thing I would do. And then the other thing that is a tip that maybe somebody might not think about is, who's your favorite author in your work? Who's the favorite author of stuff that you've read? See if you can find a poster that they've presented, and look at their poster, because it's probably in your line of work, and it would be good to see what they shared with you in a poster format with that locked real estate. Next, consider the poster requirements for the conference you're going to. and follow those to the letter. Okay? Whatever they tell you, you need to do. That's in abstract and also in the poster. If you're you're putting in a poster abstract, do what they tell you. Then think about the takeaway needing the most space. And then I would encourage you to do your poster and share it with other people that you trust to get their takeaway from them about what did you see? What did you like? What was really noisy to you that just didn't get the message across? What was confusing to you? And then help with how can I get my message stronger? Sort of like you're doing your own peer review. The final tip that I would offer is there is no one way to create a poster. There are so many ways to create a poster. I would encourage you to find your way. Now, I like my own way. I'm pretty autonomous, so I like having my options. There are other folks that I know who want the structure. This is the way you need to do it. That's fine. It all works, but it needs to work for you. So I would encourage you, don't let rules be rules over you, but let your message, what you want to share, be the thing that guides you about what your poster looks like, what you put in the biggest real estate spot, even the headings that are across. Let that be in a combination of what does the conference say you need to have and what you need for your story to get told. So those would be the things I would think about. Carrie, what else would you add?
I think you did a great job. I don't have anything to add on that one.
Awesome.
On a different note, what options are available for archiving or preserving my project work?
So you've put all this time and effort into your DNP projects. And at this point, it only makes sense to make sure it's preserved and it's accessible for the long term. So there's several great options for archiving your work, and I'm going to share a few of them. So let's first start with digital repositories. These are online platforms specifically designed to store and share scholarly work, thesis, dissertation, DNP projects. And many universities and colleges have their own institutional repositories, and they are essentially digital libraries where your work can be archived and accessible to others. And so usually a university repository is the easiest. It's the most straightforward option that, upon graduation, you submit your work to the repository. It ensures that your work is preserved, searchable, and available to others in the academic community. And, I'm going to share some examples of around the world. So a great option in nursing is the Sigma repository. And this is supported by Sigma Theta Tau International. It's a free online resources specifically for nursing to share their work. And if you go there, you're going to see that there's many DNP projects. It's a great way to share your work globally because Sigma is around the world and it can reach that audience. And again, it's Sigma. So that's, one of the most respected nursing organizations, out there. So, it's in good hands because, I want to underscore what I said earlier. You're archiving your work because I'm sure listeners out there, you've had this happen. Oh yeah, I saved that on my computer, but that was 3 computers ago. I need that kind of thing. The cloud is making it easier for you to save things, but this way it's archived. You have a link, you can go to it, it's there. So if you're looking for something that's more general, and there are universities that have students submit their DNP project to this, it's ProQuest Dissertation and Theses Global. So it's a massive database that archives dissertations, DNP projects from institutions around the world. So listeners out there, you may be like, yep, I submitted mine to that, or they're going to require me to do that. And then don't forget about local archiving. So this could mean Google Drive, Dropbox. It's great that you keep a physical copy. Some institutions may have you print out a physical copy, bind it. It's possible that they're doing that. However, a digital copy is a must, like you must. And again, you probably know from just my little bit talking about this, the digital repository is a great way to go. And then, think about sharing your work in multiple formats. So this could be that you've archived it in a repository, then you've created an executive summary or an infographic, like Ellen said earlier. I always love to see on posters that they have an infographic of, I could take a picture of that and that's useful to me. So that's real practical, real world kind of thing. And then, in summary, whether it's your university repository or a Sigma repository, an open access site, there's lots of ways that you can archive your DNP project so that it lives on and continues to make an impact. And, that's why you're doing this, right? You're doing it to make an impact on practice.
Next, what is an open access digital DNP project repository?
So what I just talked about was the general idea of digital repositories that aren't specific, Sigma specific to nursing, but, some of the university ones, and then ProQuest, the big ones, aren't. There are open access digital repositories that share DNP project work. And to me, these are the game changers. My dream would be that every program, DNP program in the United States, had on their website for their DNP program a little link that I could click, and I would find the DNP projects that have been done by their students. And picture that this would be, it's a giant online library, and instead of books, it's filled with DNP project papers that we could have access to, because in this podcast, we're talking about dissemination, we're talking about manuscripts, we're talking about poster presentations and disseminating your work that way. I haven't come across myself a percentage. I don't know if Ellen knows of a percentage of, how many DNP projects actually get published. I think it's very small. I think we could agree on that. I don't have an actual number, but just think, an open access digital repository lets you share your work. And there's also metrics that you can keep track of the impact. And that there are, in these digital repositories, online, open access, there are no paywalls, there are no subscriptions. It's knowledge that's freely available to the world. So now, why does this matter? Well, as a DNP student or practicing NP, your project isn't just about an academic exercise. It's a contribution to the nursing field. It's something that could help other clinicians. It could inform policy. It can even inspire future research. And for that to happen, people need to be able to find and read your work. And that's why our open access repositories come in. They make your project visible and accessible to a global audience. And that could be nurses, researchers, educators, even policymakers. So I'll give you the example of, just say you've done an amazing project on improving patient outcomes for diabetes. You archive it in an open access repository, and a nurse in Australia finds it, downloads it, opens it, and then decides to apply that in their setting in Australia. So imagine, it breaks down barriers, it lets your work have a much bigger impact than that particular setting or health system that you carried out your project in. So again, something to keep in mind, not all DNP programs have these repositories for DNP projects, even though the American Association of Colleges of Nursing recommends it as a best practice. And that if your program doesn't offer this option, don't worry, you have alternatives. The alternative that I would recommend is Sigma, the Sigma repository, because it's specific to nursing, but also you could do the ProQuest dissertation and theses global, and that'll archive it too. They're all great options for ensuring your work gets archived and gets the visibility it deserves. Alan, do you have anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is don't just know that it's there and never go back and look at it. I would go back and look to see who's, how many times has it been downloaded, wherever you can go and see if they have that kind of metric. Sometimes in like ScholarWorks and things like that, they can show you across the globe where your people are pulling from. That's always good for you to look for impact in how your work is being used. Very important. Publishing or your DNP project, whatever it is, just having it out there is not enough. It's got to be, how's it being used, if you will? How's it being translated? How's it being pulled in actually making a difference? So that would be the only thing I would add.
What metrics can I use to evaluate the reach and influence of my project work?
So Alan and I think we're going to share answering this question, and I'm going to start first. And I am going to do it in the context of the digital repository and what metrics that you can pull down from there. So the first thing that is pretty cool is you can see how many times it's been downloaded. So that's a download count. This is a very straightforward one. And then you can get a number, but then there's also a map of the world, and it will specifically show how many downloads in each part of the world. And so that can show you your reach within the United States, but also the world. And then you can put dates on it, so pay attention to, it's not going to tell you all the downloads for the history of the work. It usually has a set date amount. And so that you may want to play with that for, do you want to know the last 5 years? Do you want to know the last 30 days? That kind of thing. So in that, I also mentioned geographic reach because you could see the downloads by where in the world. So very powerful. And then just to, talk about the university that I work at, we do have a DNP project, online open access digital repository. And it's, the students get very excited to see, to go in and look at their work, and that you can go in, like I'm going into one now, just as an example, that was an implementation of a human trafficking screening tool in an immigrant service organization. And you're able to go in and see, all over the places, all over the world that it has been downloaded. And so it's very, students find this very exciting and very validating that somebody can use their work. Ellen, do you have anything to add?
Well, I do a couple of just really simple things to sort of see, there are a couple of gauges that I use to see how my work's being used, how it's being cited, that kind of thing. One is I use a really simple thing called Google Alert. And you can create a Google Alert. If you don't know how, just Google how to create a Google Alert. And it'll come up about how you create a Google Alert, and then you put in the words you want. I put my name in. And so when my name is used in an article, up pops, I get that alert, and you can pick how often you want it to come to you so that you can kind of see is your name popping up in articles. Also, I would encourage DNP graduates to register, or whatever you call that, sign up for a ResearchGate. And you might think, well, why would I do that? Because I'm a DNP and my focus is on clinical practice and, evidence-based practice and et cetera. But you don't have to be producing research to be part of that scholarly community in ResearchGate. And so I would encourage you to sign up for that, because that also they'll keep track of when your stuff is cited. So you upload your work and then they keep track of when that's cited. There are so many other opportunities to kind of track your work if you've published. There's other ways to do it, which we could talk about maybe at a different time. But at least these couple of ways will get you started, along with the things that Carrie shared with you, so that you can start to see about the impact that you're making, because that's the biggest thing. Citations are worthless unless it's really making an impact. And the other piece of that I would add on, about not just about getting cited, but it offers you opportunity. If somebody cites your work, you might want to just call them up, email them and say, hey, I saw that you cited my work. I would love to talk with you about what work you're doing. That offers opportunity for partnership, and just broadening the reach and collectively answering questions that we have that are really, we have a lot of questions that need answers in healthcare, particularly in nursing, about practice. And those are hard to answer sometimes because we don't have communities. We are often siloed into little small groups of people, and we don't get the questions because we don't have the biggest reach. So I would just encourage you to think about, it's not just how much citations you get or the exposure of your work, but it's who you can connect with to build your scholarly community as well.
And Ellen, I would add to that, I think that falls under like qualitative feedback. Don't just be about the quantitative numbers. And I think we're doing that with our AJN series. How is it being used? Who's telling us that they're using it in what health systems, what programs, what DNP programs in our state? You're in Texas, I'm in Connecticut. The people that we're interfacing with, who's asking us to come and present locally. So those are also important metrics that are not quantitative, that you don't go and sign up for something, but that still have meaning, that that you do a project and that you're told, so-and-so health system, adopted that intervention that you implemented into practice. They're now doing the same thing in their setting. And they're so glad that you shared it, because now they were able to see it and saw that, hey, that would be a great solution or whatever. So that kind of input's important too. Kind of rounds it out, right?
Right.
The picture, it fills in the picture, not just numbers.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks, Kimberly.
For more great content from the Nurse Practitioner, be sure to visit us online at tnpj.com for the latest NCPD articles, columns, and much more. Please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, as it helps with the podcast's visibility and helps us to keep bringing you this great content. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at The Nurse Practitioner Journal, and on X at TNPJ_journal. Thanks for listening. This podcast does not constitute medical advice and should not be taken as such, and does not replace professional judgment or advice. The ideas and viewpoints expressed on this podcast do not reflect the official position of the speakers, authors, affiliated organizations, the Nurse Practitioner Journal, or Wolters Kluwer. Please note that the hosts of the Nurse Practitioner podcast are not clinicians. However, we created the Nurse Practitioner podcast to bring you relevant clinical information by NPs for NPs. Thanks again for listening.